I was telling you, yeah, it takes us, there's skills that you need to have. And one of them, I think, just one of the big skills, obviously, is communication. That's probably like the biggest one that gets missed for most guys. And I teach a very simple framework that they can use, and the acronym is called MOVE. And I think that's a good one that guys can use to start instigating and getting in conversations.
I'm Garrett Salpeter, and I believe that the most powerful and transformative way to help people recover from pain and injury, heal from trauma, and reach their highest levels of fitness and performance is to focus on the nervous system. In this podcast, we'll share knowledge from the frontiers of neuroscience and inspirational stories of how applying that knowledge has empowered people from all walks of life to heal, adapt, and grow. Hello, NeuFit Nation. Welcome back to the Undercurrent podcast. And my guest today is my longtime friend, Joel Evan. We met at a conference, it was back in 2016 or 17. And then he went through our NeuFit certification back in 2019. So it was cool getting to know him and his interests. As you'll find out today, we have a lot of overlap in our interests. And then to see his career where he had a day job as a first responder, and because of his own story that he'll share, he got really into functional medicine, did a health coaching certification through Stephen Cabral, now actually works with Dr. Daniel Pompa in different capacities here. So he's had a really interesting journey in the health world. And also, like me, he's very intentional about wanting to live his best life and trying to really cultivate the skills to maximize his relationships and his overall quality of life. And he's done some amazing work in putting together that content. He's written 3 books, one of which is called Ignite, which came out a few years ago. And then just earlier this year, 2 books that came out. One is a children's book called Dad, Put the Phone Down. And then the third is going to be the main topic of our conversation today. That's his book, Limitless, which if you're just listening, you don't see me holding it up here, but I'm holding up my copy, and there's several pages that are dog-eared. I have a lot of underlines and notes in it because I thought it was fabulous. The subtitle is Forge an Unshakable Marriage and Deepen Your Bond with Your Kids. So it is, I would say, a really tactical manual. It has some theory and principles, but it also has very practical techniques that you can use and exercises you can do. And it is geared towards men to help them become better husbands and better fathers. So that is, just to be clear, the main audience to whom we're speaking today. So ladies listening to this is a good episode to share with the men in your life, whoever that might be. So I'm really excited to dive into this because he's got great content and coaching programs around this topic. And I think we can dive in. Joel, welcome.
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me, man. Such a cool intro. I totally forgot about how we originally first met too. So yeah, that was so funny. Now going back, it was at the Bulletproof conference back in, I think it was the first conference I went to, which was in 2016. It was my first one. And I was picking your brain about possibly transitioning out of law enforcement and getting into, I always loved health, physical and holistic health. And I just thought the newbie was such a great gap. I remember I was having a conversation with you talking about possibly going to chiropractic school. And I said, do you think I could skip that and possibly do the newbie instead and still help a lot of people? And I still remember what you told me. And you said, Joel, listen, we love chiropractors. They're great. They're amazing. But the things that we've seen with the newbie go even beyond chiropractic. So you said the choice is yours, but and you were right. You were right. And I know what you mean now, just because, and I love chiropractic and acupuncture. I love all this stuff. We'll find out today. But when you see someone that was paralyzed walk again, like that's something profound that I haven't seen many, technologies or equipment do. And that's something that the NeuFit can do, the newbie. So anyways, yeah, it's so cool.
And so to be clear, I totally value and don't mean to diminish the value and importance of, chiropractic training. Obviously there's a lot of things that go into, there's reasons that people go to licensed practitioners because they have to be able to screen out serious things. And obviously we don't want people outside of scope of practice. So I'll say all that.
Disclaimer.
All that to white.
Yeah, we love chiropractors. Don't get it twisted. I just went and saw one the other day. Thank God I did. I mean, totally realigned me. So yeah.
Yes. And as part of chiropractic treatment, as part of physical therapy, the NeuFit method and technology can just be a huge boost, can add a lot of value there. So I love that. I love that. Can you talk a little bit about, your story and the challenges that you went through? It's interesting. Like I really started NeuFit because I wanted to give people like me, that's, athletes who were injured, the tools and techniques and strategies that I wished I had back when I was going through injuries. And I was so frustrated with traditional physical therapy, traditional orthopedic medicine, and you kind of have a version of that. Can you tell us a little bit, just to, give us a sense of where you're coming from in all this?
Yeah, and we're talking about, just my pain in marriage and family life, or that's what we're talking about, right? In terms of the book Limitless, why I wrote it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we can talk about. You can share a little bit of the health. You can share a little bit of the health journey too. You can share some of that. I think it all kind of
it's
intertwines.
all, yeah, it all intertwines. Well, I'll just kind of go back and, here's what happened. I remember I was about 30 years old. So this is like 13 years ago, and got married and just had my first child. And there was just a lot of things that I knew about health at the time. I thought I was pretty advanced. And when I had my first child, I was sitting there as being a typical new dad. I was holding on to him, rocking him to sleep, holding on to him for 2 hours in a rocking chair. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. And if you knew who I was, like, I like to grow. I like to learn. That's like my love language. So I was like, I can't sit here for 2 hours and just be holding a baby. Like, I need to be productive in these 2 hours. So I started getting into the world of podcasts. Podcasts weren't even a thing back then. Like, nobody really talked about it, but I found out about it and I'm like, oh, this is like books on tape almost. Like, I can listen to these cool interviews. And I stumbled upon Ben Greenfield and Dave Asprey way back when. And the things they were talking about were things I never heard anybody talk about in terms of like health and like getting people better. And I never heard of these things. And I thought, again, I knew a lot. And so that was what really set me off. I thought I had a holistic mindset, but one of my big complaints in the world of even holistic health was I felt like a lot of times, people, we were talking about offline about how you said this book I love is because it's very tactical. Well, a lot of things I would hear even on Instagram and influencers, they would give me like ideas of what you could do for something like candida overgrowth, a fungal overgrowth, or parasites. You hear it even now. People say, oh, well, you could take ivermectin, or you could take this herb. You could take charcoal. Oh, that's great. But for how long? Like, how long do I take it for? And when do I stop? When do I introduce a biofilm disruptor and a binder? Like, nobody could ever explain these things to me. And so I kept wanting to learn. And I'm like, and that was, I think, even during the time I was asking you and other people, like, I don't have time to go back and become a doctor at this point. I have a family, I have kids. I'm the only one that works. Like, I've got to figure out a way to do this. And luckily, I was able to find mentors along the way who actually taught me protocols and systems. That's the key. You have to have a system to be able to do these things. It's not just an accident. You don't just throw a bunch of oregano oil randomly or some charcoal randomly to heal candida. It doesn't work that way. And so that's what kept my curiosity going. And then, of course, having a family, my son, when he was 4 years old, he developed some issues, and I couldn't figure it out. And he was also one of the reasons that made me even a better practitioner, because he forced me to learn and do other things that I would have never learned. So that was kind of that's what jumped me into the health world. And just wanting to learn more. I think my mom also came down with cancer around that time, breast cancer. And so again, you hear all these hacks and things you can do, but again, no one could tell me, well, how do you actually beat that? How do you actually prevent that? And that's what has always kept me curious and wanting to have that edge in health so that I could be the best version of me who I want to show up to today. When it comes to my marriage though, and I'll just kind of, we'll kind of move to the side here, leave that health stuff to the side. But, and this all leads up though to my marriage, because I had been married for 10 years, Garrett. As you know, I was a law enforcement officer in the past. Did that for 15 years, worked in Oakland, San Francisco. And, I worked in some pretty tough areas, but I don't really think that I was pretty good at numbing out and detaching from, I think, work and then moving into my home life. So I thought, but what was interesting is throughout my entire marriage for 10 years, it was a train wreck. I mean, it was just, there were times where it was like 1 week was good, 1 week was bad. 1 week, there was never any stability, and I couldn't figure it out. And it pissed me off as a high performer like you, someone always looking for that edge. And I read all the books. I went to marriage counseling therapy on and off for 4 years. I hired parenting coaches. I did gut protocols on my son. I did everything, man. I did everything I thought was possible. And at some point I just threw up my hands and said, there's really nothing I can do because I love to learn. So it's not like it wasn't a matter of not trying. I was trying. I love to learn, like I said, and that's why I have all these books behind me. Like I read them all. I love this stuff. But again, I couldn't fix my marriage. Nothing ever stuck, and it bothered me. But at some point, I just gave up and said, "This has nothing to do with me. You've done everything. It's clearly your wife is the problem." Like, or it's your wife and kids, right? Like I blame both. I blame both, like wife and kids. I'm like, it's just you guys are the problem, clearly, because, and I didn't like say this openly. It was just something subconsciously that I thought, like, yeah, like you guys are the problem because there's nothing else. I don't know. I literally don't even know what I can do. Like I want people to know it almost like wasn't even an ego thing. I literally just felt like I tried it all. I gave it my best shot. And I just kind of went down the road that I think most people go, where they go, yeah, um, maybe marriage is not, you're not meant to, maybe there's somebody I was supposed to meet. And so I just haven't met that person. You start going down that route and you start thinking, maybe I just haven't met that person. And part of that could be true for other people's journey. Right. And so, needless to say, that was kind of the path I was going. And, our family, we moved out of state from where we're originally from in California to Idaho. And there were some big changes during the pandemic that we decided to make. And so about a year of having moved away from our close family, it was just me, my wife, and the kids now in Idaho, away from all of our close knit family and friends. And my wife looks at me and she's like, you need to change. Like you need to do something about this marriage. Matter of fact, she's like, you need to, I think you should go work with this coach. You should go work with him. He's like a dad coach. And I'm like, uh-huh. I was like, well, here's the thing. I don't know if you know this, but I recently lost my job, to my wife. Right now, the priority is I need to make money because I can't actually be present right now with you. The reason I'm not present at the house right now has nothing to do with, it has everything to do with my business is not working. I need to scale that first. And when I do that, I'll have more time and then I can be present to you, the kids, and la-di-da. The world's going to be great then, right? But she was not having it, Garrett. She was like, no, I'm not buying that. Like, you need to work with this coach. And I'm like, listen, like, we don't even have the money for me to spend on this coach. And you want me to go work with this coach. Like, I think the priorities are different. And she was adamant about it. I could just tell she would not let this thing go. And, it was just a lot of just tension going on. And by the way, here's the interesting thing I want to tell everybody. Nothing had happened in our relationship that was like, Joel, this needs to change. Like you're not doing. It was actually just normal. There was nothing like major that had changed. But later when I talked to my wife, she's like, yeah, I just really just got sick and tired of being sick and tired. And it just kind of, that was it. And she later told me, she's like, yeah, if you hadn't changed, I actually had made up in my mind I was going to divorce you within a year. I was going to give you a year to figure it out. And if you didn't figure it out, I was going to divorce you. So I didn't know that, but I just knew at the time she was very serious. And so I took her up on working with this coach because I was like, you know what? I'm just sick and tired of this. And clearly, like, she needs to do the work too. I have no problem doing the work, but I do think she needs to do the work. But once again, I'll take the leadership role. I'll do it fine, begrudgingly. And I actually thought to myself, here's the cool part. I thought, you know what? What's the worst that can happen? If I work with this coach and it works out, then great, it works out. And if it doesn't, hey, at least I can say I did everything. And clearly, again, my theory that you're to blame will be proven right. So I'm like, it's a win-win for me either way. So I took her up on it and I started working with this coach. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll give you a breath and I'll take a breath and you can ask me whatever you want. But so I started working with this coach and I took it really upon myself to go all in on that month. It was a year-long process, but I worked, that first month I was like, I'm going to go really all in and take this serious. And I started noticing some changes in my relationship with my wife and my kids, positive changes. And it didn't happen like right away. Things didn't happen right away, but things started to change. I started to see the shift. I started to just stay in it, keep doing what I was doing. And it was working. And I tell everybody this from our marriage, from day one of that first started training to month 3, within 90 days, like our marriage was a complete 180, completely changed. And I mean, I would never even have believed that. And so I just kept going down this path and kept learning more, worked with other coaches and other leaders and thought leaders in the space. And started talking to other guys, and they're like, "What are you up to?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm working on my marriage." And they're like, "Oh, my marriage sucks. What are you learning?" And so I just realized, man, there's real need out there for other guys to learn this stuff. And so that's why I wrote the book, and that's why I still do the coaching and work with other guys today. That's how it all happened.
That's awesome. I I love that story. Just that the key. I mean, obviously the key there is the that you went all in. You really trusted in the process and tried it, and then you started to see some positive change there. So nothing motivates like seeing glimpses of improvement, right? If we see that what we're doing is working, that's the biggest motivating factor. It's like, hunter gatherer days when you find food in a certain place. There's a release of dopamine and other neurochemicals, and that triggers you to be motivated to go back to that place, right? You want to keep doing what you're doing when you get positive rewards. So when you start to see progress in 30 days, whole new marriage in 90 days, I mean, that's awesome. And I think that can be inspiring for many people, including myself, to see that progress can be made quickly. And I would like to dive into a little bit, or perhaps even a lot, on how you made that progress. And one of the biggest foundational important pieces of information that you share in the book, and I think we need to talk about, is that one is you talk about how the quality of our relationships determines the quality of our life. So that's it. So understanding the importance, and then question is, okay, if it's important, how do we work on it? I think one of the things that you described so clearly and effectively is that these component parts that are important for good relationships, like communication, like our mindset, like leadership, whether it's relationships at work, whether it's relationships, spousal, romantic relationships, parental relationships, these component parts are skills, and like any skills, they can be learned, and with practice can be improved upon, and we can build habits around them. And driving is a skill, and in the beginning it's so scary. I'm teaching my daughter how to drive now, and it's like, okay, we're gonna go real slow in the parking lot, and then just inside the neighborhood, and then go out onto the streets, and eventually you get to the point where it's second nature because you learn that skill. And that was just one of the things that really struck me. And then of course you in your book and your program you teach these skills. But can you comment a little bit on the sort of these pillars and how that framework really, I'd say, empowers anyone looking to become a better leader, a better husband, a better father?
Yeah, that's so good, man. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, one of the things I always say is that marriage is a skill. And just like you just said, and I never thought of it that way in the past. So that was even a reframe for me. And that's why I say it so often, so that guys will get it over their head. Because when I look back and I think, look at all the success anyone has ever had in your life, in my life. When I look at my health success, well, what was that? It was studying. It was going back. It was trying. It was experimenting. It was failing. It was going back again, experimenting more and failing, right? And learning. And whether it's your wealth or your health, the same tactics that I applied in those areas of my life that worked out well was all because I had systems and habits in place that got me there, and consistency. And it's the same thing with marriage. If we actually thought of it as a skill and not like, oh, I just got lucky, like I was telling you earlier, oh, I just got lucky, I found the right one. Well, if you have that idea or belief, then yeah, you're always going to be looking for the right one, because marriages and relationships, they're not easy. And they're not. And so they take work. And just like anything else, sometimes we forget that. And I think we also have a vision or an idea of what a marriage might look like, but everybody's marriage can be different. You go talk to your friends or you talk at work, and what the common thing is like, oh yeah, I'm dealing with the ball and chain or whatever, right? It's usually a negative connotation, right? And very rarely do I feel like I talk to a guy and they're like, oh man, my wife is just so amazing. Like I have no problems. I remember actually a good friend of mine, that was his life. And I'm like, something's wrong with you. Like, this is before I had my own transformation. I'm like, really? Like nothing you would complain about? He's like, no, she's just amazing. I'm like, so then again, we make these ideas in our head, these fantasies, like, man, well, maybe I just didn't find, Mrs. Right. But so at the end of the day, like I was telling you, yeah, it takes us, there's skills that you need to have. And one of them, I think, just one of the big skills obviously is communication. That's probably like the biggest one that gets missed for most guys. And I teach a very simple framework that they can use, and the acronym is called MOVE. And I think that's a good one that guys can use to start instigating and getting in conversations. And I'm going to explain why. The reason why communication is so important is that a lot of times when there's pitfalls in our relationship, we might have the conversation once, but then we don't have it again, or we're too scared to because we're fearful that it might rub them the wrong way, or we're just like, you know what, she doesn't care. We start again making up stories. We were talking about this offline. Like our brain just fills in the gap. It's really good at just filling in the gap. And so the problem for me in the communication side of things, as an example, was I could be a leader at work and lead men through tactical situations, and people valued me. Actually, I was, very regarded, in at work. I was seen as a leader, but then I would come home and my wife did not see me as a leader. She thought that I wasn't any of these things that people saw me at work. And I was like, where's the disconnect? She clearly didn't see it. And I didn't know how to convey that to her. And one way you can do that, again, is through communication. But I didn't know how to get into these sticky, icky conversations with her because I didn't have that framework. No one taught me this model, so to speak. So it was either very difficult for me to get in the conversations and have them in an appropriate way that my wife would be seen and heard and felt like she wasn't being attacked. But then at the same time, difficult for me to get in a conversation that I was like, I really don't want to have, or because I just know where it's going to go. She's going to blow up and this is what she's going to do. Right. So that's why understanding this framework as an example, a skill, is really, really important. And so again, what does it stand for MOVE? MOVE is the M stands for mirror. So you're going to mirror the person whenever you're talking. Like I'm using a lot of hand gestures. Maybe if you were speaking to me, you would use hand gestures or things like that. The O is for ownership. And this is probably one of the biggest pieces that you'll take away, which is you got to own whatever it is that you did. There's a lot of times when we get in these situations where you probably don't feel like you did anything wrong, and you probably didn't. And that's okay. But just take ownership for what might have been perceived as wrong, right? Like, hey, I just want to let you know, like that conversation that we just had just earlier, I take ownership for kind of my tone of voice. I could see how that might have affected you. Like, I used to hate doing that, Garrett, because why am I taking ownership for something that this is not even a big deal? You're making a big deal out of nothing, but it doesn't matter because you know what? It doesn't matter to me. It matters to her. So I'm just taking ownership for how I can see how that might have affected you. I'm not saying like I was the problem. All the onus comes on me. I'm just saying, yeah, I could see how that might have made you feel. And so I think that's where we have to, that's a tough one for a lot of guys to do, especially when it's like, I didn't do anything wrong. Maybe you didn't, but it doesn't matter. She thinks it's all about perception. So ownership, the V is for validate. And I kind of did that. I tied that one in with that example. I'm just validating your concerns or whatever it is that you felt to be true. So I'm just validating and saying, hey, yeah, like I can see that. And then the E is empathize. And empathy is just really just think about it as putting yourself in their shoes, right? Which I kind of did all those in like one kind of, depending what that example was, which was just maybe a communication. Maybe you blew up or something, you didn't respond well, and then it led into some kind of little tiff or something. You come back into that conversation and you clean it up that way. So that would be an example of skills that we need, but a lot of times we don't even know how to get into those conversations. So how can we access it? How can we access that tool on our tool belt when we don't even know how to get there?
Yeah, for sure. And thinking back to my own marriage, and I'm speaking this as someone who's, currently separated, which I've mentioned on the, podcast before, but, looking back, I went through a lot of the same things you're talking about, like, blaming her, blaming the situation, and understanding, and your book is a big catalyst and one of the most kind of influential sources of information that has shown me the ways that I could have done better in that, and has allowed me to take ownership. And this is one framework that I can promise you would have been helpful for me, especially in some of those, what do you say, sticky, icky situations, conversations. Yeah. So that's a really good framework. And again, I like it because it's simple and tactical, and it's something that I could see myself using in the moment of a heated conversation or something like that, where it's, it's actually tactical enough that I could actually pull that out when I'm under duress. So,
Yeah. And that's the key. That's the key.
yeah.
And it takes practice. You got to get into those. And I will say too, for guys listening, you've got to do it multiple times, because I can tell you the first month my wife knew I was working with this guy. I thought I was going to get a slap on the back and kudos and, hey, great job. Like, you signed up. She didn't care. You know what she was going through back in her mind? I can't trust him. That was her thing. Yeah, it's starting off to look good, but he'll let me down again. This is nice for the first week, right? So she had her own perception of what it was going to look like for me too. So I had to come back and almost I had to prove to her, I had to rebuild that trust. So just because you had one good week, 2 good weeks, 3 good weeks, didn't matter to her. So that first week.
What have you done for me lately?
What's that?
What have you done for me lately?
Yeah. Last week, what'd you do for me last week? Last week, it's a whole new week. It's a whole new week, baby.
Thank you so much for listening to the Undercurrent podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how NeuFit and the newbie can impact your life, please visit our website at www.new.fit. That's NEU.FIT. So you can learn more about how it might integrate into your professional practice, how you can use it as a patient, and you can also connect with our team there.
So that actually is a good segue into one of these other core skills that you've already mentioned, at least in passing, and that is leadership. And if you think about leadership, a lot of us. So if we're thinking of a man listening to this who owns a physical therapy clinic and has a team, part of effective leadership, 100% is instilling a sense of trust. The people you are leading have to trust in your direction for the business, right? You're setting the direction of the business. They have to trust in where you are leading them. They have to trust that you are going to be able to pay their salaries every 2 weeks. They have to trust that you're going to be able to do what you say you're going to do in terms of marketing initiatives to get patients in or maintain compliance so that you're not going to get shut down, right? So, trust is a huge component of leadership. And there's also some of the things that you've talked about in the book and even touched on a little bit so far today too, of the notion of leadership being ownership, like extreme ownership. If I'm the leader, then I'm ultimately responsible. And so many times I know as a husband, just sort of abdicated rather than delegated. I sort of abdicated my responsibilities around making decisions or making plans and sort of expected, even sometimes without vocalizing the expectation, expecting, at the time, my wife to sort of take on those responsibilities or burdens. And so that's something that I see now about the clarity of communication and expectations, and also taking leadership. And leadership doesn't necessarily mean doing it. It can mean delegating, but it doesn't mean abdicating. So I think this is just a really interesting topic. Can you share your perspective on leadership and how, I don't even know if I necessarily thought about leadership outside of the workplace and bringing those same principles at home. So that was a bit of an epiphany for me to make that connection in the first place. But can you sort of talk about what it means to actually, for a man to be a leader at home?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And also tying back into what you said, abdicating, I was notorious for that too. Right. And there's this really interesting book that was done on law enforcement officers by this guy who was a prior law enforcement officer, Dr. Gil Martin. And he wrote this book on first responders. And it was like the emotional, I forget what exactly it's called, emotional, resilience or emotional intelligence for first responders. And one of the things that he said about officers is, in general, is that they have to make decisions all day long. That is their job. To other people, their life is in shambles. They can't make a decision. Guess who? What? You got to call us 911. Someone's got to come out and make that decision for you because you can't do it in your own life. And so what happens in law enforcement is you get so tired of making decisions, they say, that when you go home, again, you're this leader at work, and then you go home and now you don't want to make decisions. You're like, I don't care. You're apathetic to everything. Like, yeah, whatever. What do you want for dinner? I don't care, whatever. And that was kind of my personality anyways. It was just like, yeah, like I'm pretty easygoing, right? But I wouldn't even make decisions about that. And my wife would be like, just make a decision. Or like, I just want, like, what do you want? Like, I'll cook it. I don't care. I just want you to make it. I'm like, I don't care. Like, and that was just me, like, not wanting to rock the boat, but just also being like, hey, either way, it's fine with me. But that kind of, even just like simple things like that, like not making those little decisions. What I would notice for my wife is she wanted more help or support at the house in making not just decisions about dinner, but just other decisions within our kids or things that we were doing. And a lot of times I would just, like you said, I would just say, well, yeah, you can make that. Like whatever you think is good, I trust you in that. And I thought, again, that was a good quality by me not rocking the boat. Like I'm not trying to create any issues here, but instead it actually did cause issues, right? It actually did, because I wasn't showing up powerfully. I wasn't leading. I wasn't taking on responsibilities that she actually wanted me to take on. And so again, some of these things you can triage just by simply having like a weekly meeting or a weekly checkpoint with your wife, right? So that those things don't get missed, because it's so easy. We just get so busy with kids, and I know right after this, you've got to take your daughter to a practice, right? And that's just how it is, man. It's like you're a leader at work. You are running a freaking business. You are an entrepreneur, and you know what happens. The business never stops. It never stops. I saw you just the other day. You were out somewhere teaching a seminar, and so it's like whether you're coaching, training, running your own facility, it's like it never stops. And so then you got to come home, and it's like I got to make more decisions. I don't want to, but sometimes you do. And again, if we can have those conversations and we have those checkpoints, a weekly check-in or something like that, we can systematize it. So we have those checkpoints. Then your wife and you can have these conversations that have just probably been pushed off for years and years, and you can have them in a very respectful way. And what I love about, I'm just going to use that as an example, the weekly check-in, is because it's a weekly check-in and you set it on your calendar and it has to happen. Like I give you a framework in the book that you can use too. It's like, 4 or 5 questions you can use. And because of this, the beauty of it is it's very objective. It's not like, oh, I didn't know Garrett was going to ask me this question this week. He's attacking me. It's like, no, actually, I'm not. You knew this question was coming because we agreed that these are questions we're going to ask each other. And as soon as I ask it to you, you get to ask it back to me. So it's on me too. I got to show up and play full out. So again, I saw a lot of the breakthroughs, in our own family life where I just wasn't taking leadership. I wasn't taking ownership. And one of the big key things I would tell you too, when it comes to leadership, this is something that really stuck with me. Jocko Willink said this in his book, and you had mentioned extreme ownership. And I don't know if it was in this book or his second book, but he said, there's no bad teams. There's just bad leaders. And I could quote that quote all the time, but I didn't live it. And when I really started to think about that quote and embody it, it started to piss me off because I knew I was wrong at home. And I didn't like that because I started to realize, my team, my family, we're not doing well. There's a lot of dysfunction here with my kids. There's a lot of arguing we're having. My wife and I are in this tense space all the time. And so, yeah, it's a nice quote to say, yeah, leaders, it's the leader's fault, not the team's fault. But a lot of leaders won't take that responsibility. Like if the mission goes bad, it's just easy to be like, well, yeah, Garrett, you shouldn't have went in. I didn't tell you to go in there. No, you know what he says in the book? He's like, it was your fault, Joel, because you didn't tell Garrett didn't understand the mission clearly. He should not have went into that room by himself. What did you do to not explain it correctly so that Garrett didn't do that? I started using that same mentality that our SWAT teams and everybody, special forces and everybody else use. And I started doing the same thing in my marriage. So anytime something went bad, at least in the beginning, especially in the beginning, man, when you're trying to fix these things, when you take that kind of ownership and you don't take it personal, something goes wrong, this happens, there's a blowout, and you just say, yeah, that was all me. And again, in the beginning, it's hard because who wants to admit that they're wrong? I'm the worst at admitting that. I'll tell you right now. But when you start taking that kind of ownership, it's just so binary. And you're not taking emotion and making stories out of it. You're just like, yeah, it must have been my fault. And that kind of leadership what I started to learn is this, because a lot of guys I've noticed will do this. They will say, yeah, like even what I told you in the beginning. Yeah, it's my wife needs to change. She's got the problems. And don't get me wrong, she does need to change. There's things about her she could work on and change and get better. And I'm not saying that that's not true. But what I found, ironically, through going through this process is that the more that I changed and the person I started becoming, my family naturally, the culture started to shift in our home. People started to change on their own. So instead of me saying like, hey, you need to change, I don't like your tonality. Like we've all had those conversations with our wife. You just disrespect me. You're not talking to me correctly. We've all had those conversations. That very rarely works. Your wife very rarely is like, no, I'm talking to you. This is how I always talk, right? Or whatever. Those very rarely work. But when we start leading from the front and they start to see it consistently over and over again, that this guy just keeps showing up, they start to change. They start to realize. And then from there, you get to start enrolling your kids and wife. Again, I changed the culture so much, they just started falling into my new rhythm. I started setting the new frequency. They just fell right into it. But so that's going to happen. But then even from that place, now you can start enrolling them. Now you can start engaging them and say, hey, have you ever thought that your tone might be just a little bit harsh with me when we got in that argument last week? No, I didn't know that. That's where you can start to build that gap. But you can't do that in the beginning. You can't do it. There's too much tension and not enough trust. Your wife doesn't trust you. So you can't tell her anything. So you got to get kicked in the teeth for the first month or 3 like I did. And then you're going to start getting those wins.
That's great. I love that. How you're speaking to, one of the primary ways to effectively lead, and that's to lead by example, where you don't ask them to change, but you change, and then it's like the first domino that starts to cause these other changes too, by setting that rhythm, as you said. So I love that. I also feel like we need to drill down a little bit on this. There is a little bit of a point here where we, for some people, perhaps butt up against some of these cultural questions around, like, male versus female roles, husband and wife roles in the family and things like that. And we're talking about how men need to lead. And, I'm the father of 2 daughters, and I fully believe that, my daughters can do anything that they want to in life. And, I can have, and I wish for them to have, professional aspirations and things like that. And at the same time, I also think that we have to respect that, men generally, at least the masculine energy, the masculine part of us, generally do get more sense of satisfaction from fulfilling a mission in the world, having a sense of purpose, where there's a sense of direction and therefore leadership involved in that. And when the feminine energy is able to relax into that sense of leadership and thrive in more of the ways that they are able to thrive and be fulfilled energetically, that does seem to be a healthy dynamic for a marriage. So there is a little bit of that, that dynamic. I don't know. Someone might say, well, you're just advocating for, the 1950s with submissive spouses, submissive wives and stuff like that. I'm not doing that, but I am saying, for us to be effective husbands, I mean, what you're saying, and I'm agreeing with, and I'm just wanting to emphasize, is that, for us as men to be effective husbands, oftentimes we need to really cultivate and step into and own those more masculine qualities of leadership, of setting direction, of making decisions, of taking responsibility. And I just think there's so much value in that. And I'd be curious, you reference in the book here, you reference the Glover book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, and talk about, like, alpha male versus alpha female. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about these sort of, I don't know if gender dynamics is the way to say it, but a little bit of this sort of masculine feminine dichotomy, and how you use that framework to inform some of these recommendations about effective marriage.
Yeah. Well, So what you're touching on too is this idea of like feminine masculine polarity, right? And you're right. You know, we live in a world now where everybody has rights, and it's a beautiful thing, right? I'm not disagreeing that it's not, but that has also shifted to put women more in leadership roles, which I think is also a positive thing. But what we've seen too is because women are now put, and like you just said, they actually have shown like these roles, masculine, like you said, very mission oriented production. Why is it that guys love to go hunt and do? We like that we're doers, and women are just naturally more nurturing, the lovers, the beers. They call it like that radiant divine being. They're very radiant, warm, they're giving, they pull you in. But women can't. What we see often now in a lot of other coaches and other, you know, thought leaders that I've worked with and read some of their work, is that the women, they can't relax into that feminine, because imagine if they're doing a very masculine role, doing all day, and they're doing, then they come home and they're beat and they need to soften, they need to come back into that feminine, just like guys need to be in their masculine if they're at work and doing the great stuff. There's times where it's a yin yang, they got to come into their feminine and soften. It's not always right, it's not, there's this beautiful duality, so they have to do both. Now the thing about that Glover talks about though in Mr. Nice Guy, and the reason I talk about this because I see this on a lot of guys, and I was a typical freaking nice guy. And it's this identity that, again, I told you this earlier, I've said it many times, oh, I'm not going to rock the boat, I just want things to be even, you know, keel. I want people to foresee me as being nice. My wife used to say this to me all the time. She used to say things like, everyone just thinks you're so nice, but like, but you're not. And I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? Like, I genuinely think I am nice, like I do think I treat you well, like what are you talking about? But now, from like taking a step outside, I can kind of see what she means, right? She didn't feel that I was bringing maybe that same masculine energy that other people were getting. She was getting like the apathetic Joel, like, what's for dinner? I don't care, right? Or what are we going to do? I don't care, whatever. And it's like, that's not the leader, the fun person that everyone else gets to see. I thought I was being nice by being apathetic and just kind of letting things go. And I wasn't. A lot of nice guys too, they're fixers, right? And they're caretakers. So they want to always like solve problems and like be seen again as the nice guy. So I would say, yeah, even though that's a good thing to like fix things, but also you have to just be careful because it could come off as like, again, you're the nice guy. Again, trying to avoid conflict, right? That's a big one. But by avoiding conflict, like my MO was just to shut down. So I would just, my wife, you know, she's Latina. She's very like fiery, and she'll tell you what's on her mind. And I just was raised in a household where we didn't really I never saw my parents fight. Whatever they did was behind closed doors. So it was a very just like, if you were to raise my voice, like I would, like, I take that offensively. Like, you're raising your voice at me. So I used to always, when my wife would do that, I just thought like, this is so disrespectful. Like, why are you coming at me like this way? I would never talk to you this way. And so for me, that used to just piss me off. So I would avoid conflict because I'm like, I'm not coming at you like that, which was smart. I think you don't want to fight fire with fire. But again, that would have been a good chance. But I didn't do anything, Garrett. I just like, oh, okay. I would just like, let me walk out of the room and be like, yeah, you go be ridiculous, was kind of my attitude. But then there was never any, I never came back and fixed what was the problem. And that was always, so then things would brew. My wife used to say, she's like, man, you're just so good at, you can go days without talking to me. And I'm like, yep. Cause I could just detach. I was like, yeah, like but that was also my personality, my upbringing, right? There was a lot of things that led up to that. Then becoming a cop, like it just reinforced those attitudes of just being like, yeah, I can detach. Because I got a job to do. I got to go to work and I got to do things. I can't be thinking about my relationship and then go to these calls. Not safe. So I did detach. And so, but again, that apathy, and because I never went back and actually fixed the problem, which I should have done using that move framework, I should have come back and said, hey, I'm taking leadership. I'm taking there's a problem that, and I think I refer to it as in the book as we have to have like a State of the Union address here. there's a problem, and I'm gonna solve it. Not ego, I'm gonna solve it, but I'm taking charge here because I'm not okay with the status quo. That is not okay in this family. So I'm taking control, and I'm gonna start creating solutions. What are we gonna do to fix this? Because I'm on your side. Then I'll probably start with saying, how did I show up in that conversation that pissed you off? Let me take ownership with that because that wasn't good. I could see why that messed up, right? I'm going to start building trust again, right? But again, the nice guys will typically not do that. And then they just always try to appease and like do nice things. And again, one of the things I talk about in the book too is you're usually just spinning your wheels and wasting energy in an area that it's not going to move the needle in your relationship. So that's why, and I saw my dad do it, and my dad ended up divorcing with my mom, and he was a typical nice guy too. You know, you think you're doing all the nice things, but that's not really what your wife even really wants. So you're spending so much energy because you think this is what she wants, presents or whatever, birthday gifts, all those other things that people tell you to do, you know, compliments here and there. It's not that it's a bad thing, but you're just focusing so much. It's the 80-20 rule, and you're focusing the 80% in an area that it doesn't even matter. Like that's not what moves the needle in the relationship.
Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of things that you mentioned there that, you know, that whole notion of not wanting to rock the boat. And it reminds me of this theme we've been talking about of there's things that we might do in the workplace that we don't necessarily bring home. And so it reminds me, for example, of as a team several years ago at NeuFit, we read the book Radical Candor. And that book by Kim Scott is all about the importance of being candid, of having difficult conversations. And one of the examples in there, which I fell into, you know, as a recovering nice guy also, where, you know, I would be very slow and perhaps not at all willing to give negative feedback to someone if they weren't performing up to a certain standard or there was an issue. I wouldn't want to bring it up because I wanted to spare their feelings. And you know, I learned that book was really the first time that it sort of shined a mirror on me and was like, oh shit, I'm actually doing that person and myself and the organization a disservice, because if I don't share that feedback with them, they can't improve. They're going to continue to perform poorly. They're not going to be happy. You know, they're at risk of losing their job. We're wasting resources as a company. It's like, oh shit, I have this responsibility to bring that up to them, and I can do it with. I also have heard about this notion of joyful accountability. It's not. I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm not calling this out because I don't like you. I'm actually doing this because I care about you and I care about our team and I care about you being able to reach your potential because I see that you have potential. And look, in this area, you're not living up to it. And so being able to have those difficult conversations from a place of authenticity and truth more than just wanting to spare feelings and not rock the boat. And that takes courage. And, you know, of course, courage is one of the qualities we typically associate with effective leaders. And it was interesting that I can say in my own experience, there's times when I didn't have it at work. And then there's times when I did have it at work and then didn't necessarily make the connection that I should also bring that home as well. So it's just another example of the theme that you're talking about of applying the same principles we might use leading a business or leading people in other circumstances, bringing those home as well. But I think that is, and as part of that sort of masculine energy is ultimately searching for truth, and you know, that sort of being the priority and the North Star beyond just, you know, being a doormat or just not wanting to rock the boat, as you said, stuff like that too. So I think that's a great point, and I just wanted to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, it's so good, man. It's so good. There was a quote I remember hearing too. My boss used to say this, and he said, and it was there was an interview I think that Joe Rogan did that where this came from, but he said, honest conflict has more value than dishonest harmony. So honest conflict has more social value than dishonest harmony. And it's so true, right? Because oh no, I don't want to cause any conflict. And so we're just lying to ourselves a lot of times by trying to keep things, you know, even keel.
Yeah, that's a great And then there's another good framework here that I really like from Corey Muscara, who's I did a retreat with him, which I've talked about on the podcast, and done some of his courses and read his book. And he talks about how to. He talks a lot about meditation as a technique for dropping in, going inward, and understanding where I'm being driven more by ego and the mind versus where I'm living from alignment with my true self. And one application of that is in relationships, and it's about whether I'm doing something that's really healthy and aligned versus codependent. And the question he asked there is, and it's right in line with this idea of not rocking the boat. The question is, am I doing this? When I'm interacting with my partner, with my spouse, am I doing this out of love for this person, or am I doing this to get love from this person? And if I'm doing it to get love from this person, I'm compromising something about who I truly am in order to feel like I need to perform and be a certain way. And that ultimately, I think it will be self-evident to you listening to this, and of course to you, Joel, that ultimately can lead us down a path where we just get so far out of alignment that we don't even recognize who we are or how we show up, or certainly are so far away from where we intended to be in the first place. But that was one other framework that I just felt compelled to share there.
That's so good that you said that. Yeah, that's one of the things too we talk about is, nice guys typically want to seek approval. And that is so me, man. That was how and I look back, and my mom, I just always wanted to prove to her that I was good enough. And I tell people, I go look back at it now, I go, well, that's what drove me as a child to get good grades, do good in sports. That's probably what shaped me into be like a goal achiever, who I am now. Because I wanted my mom's love. I wanted to show her that I was good enough, and she loved me and valued me for my accomplishments. But again, where all these things show up in our marriage, and they're fully spotlighted. And so going back to the skill work, if you don't do these skills and start learning some of these, making these shifts, you're just going to go down that path that everybody does. And one of the things I open up with the book, I talk about it. 50%, go to Forbes 2024. I think it was 2023 or 2024, said the average, like the divorce rate is like 46, 50%. I mean, it's a crapshoot, man. Are you getting married right now? There's a pretty good chance you're going to get a divorce. Right. And beyond that is second and third marriages. They're like 76% divorce rate. And again, I think it's because I was this close to going down that trap. If I didn't go through the fire that I had to go through to learn these things, I would have just blamed my wife. I would have left this marriage and I would have been like, yeah, she was the problem. And no wonder it didn't work out. And I would have never learned anything because I would have just blamed her and been like, it was her fault. It was the kid's fault. And I would have been on to the next relationship doing the exact same things. And then there would have been that nice honeymoon phase. And then what would have happened? I would have got pissed off again.
Yeah, I think a marriage and owning a business are both really wonderful opportunities to come to understand our own shit. If we really sit back and look at, from the extreme ownership perspective, like, what have I done to contribute to this? What difficulty am I having right now? Is it a difficulty with an underperforming team member, or have I taken on too much responsibility and financial burden, or whatever it might be? What's actually zooming out? Okay, just objectively, what's happening here? How did I contribute to it? And has this appeared in my life before? Like, I think we can probably start to see if we look at it with a little bit of objectivity. Of course, it's very difficult to look at ourselves objectively, but I think we often can see. And so, like, I, for example, saw these patterns of, people pleasing, like you talk about from childhood, feeling like I wasn't enough, like I needed to do certain things or be a certain way in order to get love and approval and a sense of belonging, and how that led me to have difficulty providing feedback or keeping people on the team for too long, even when there were issues, and I allowed issues to fester. And when I finally sat back and said, like, what the heck is going on here? Oh, it's me. It's just, marriage can be, I think I was probably at certain points more motivated to improve the business. And so I looked at it more closely. And then when I also look closely at the marriage, I can see those same sorts of patterns too. So these are just wonderful mirrors to look
Yeah.
at, to show us what's going on here. So they're really, really good opportunities for personal and spiritual and psychological development. So there's in terms of development and growth. There's so many other topics in your book. We're not going to be able to talk about when you talk about some of the science of willpower and ways to address because that's a finite resource. You talk about limiting beliefs. There's so many of these really powerful psychological principles. You talk about the fundamental human needs and how that relates to connection. You also talk about something I recorded a podcast on recently, which is the value in, and you're one of the people who inspired me to look at this seriously, so thank you, but the value in contemplating our own mortality. So just to give you listening to this a flavor of what's in Joel's book, which I highly, highly recommend, Limitless. Joel, based on the conversation thread that we've had here and knowing your content, what are the final, 1 to 2 sort of topics or to help put a bow on our discussion here today, knowing there's so many things we're not going to be able to touch, but what are sort of the best ways you think to wrap up this conversation?
Yeah, dude. That's a tough one because there's so many things, right? I actually think we've actually touched on everything in terms that for anybody listening that they can walk away and go, okay, I got some tangible things. And also like the biggest thing that I would always get it through to everybody is that it's all about leadership. And we talked about that. It's leadership, it's ownership, and then it's taking action. Action is always the antidote. And again, you can listen to these things, you can do these, you can go to the podcast, you can read the books, but if you don't take action and you don't actually do any of it, and again, the action, here's a big mistake, like I told you, and I tried to like breadcrumb it along as we were talking, that you might take action. I went to therapy, guys, for 4 years on and off. I thought I was doing it all. And therapy is great. There were some things I learned, but it wasn't what got me to the finish line. And I think there are things that are missing in therapy that aren't a complete package. But it's easy to go to therapy once a week or do something like that once a week on and off and get some good advice. But to show up consistently over and over again and do it, that's the unique quality. And that is what it's going to take to really make some big changes in your relationship. Because I've had a good week. I've had a good couple of days and it didn't last. Then what? Just like in your business. Oh, we didn't make payroll. Oh, we didn't do this. We got to figure it out. And through those struggles is where we grow. That's where we get to the next level. And it's so easy in a relationship. We were talking about marriage and relationship. So I will say this. You were talking about, yeah, they're so similar. They are, but relationships, I think, can be sometimes more difficult because they're so damn emotional. Because it's like, so are businesses. But at the same time, it's like, well, it's a business. It's like not a person. And so I think we can think of almost like a business being black and white. We don't see the same way with our spouse because we're like, yeah, but she's different. Yeah, but I've tried these things with her. She's just so different. I can't get through to her, or I can't communicate, or she's just that way, right? We've all said that. And so that's what makes it a little bit of a dance and a little bit different than the business, because our brain will start filling in gaps and making stories. So the biggest thing I always try to leave people with those, yeah, be freaking intentional. I can tell you, I think one of my biggest errors when I started doing this work and having done it years and doing therapy is I had a couple of good weeks, but that was it. And then it fell off. It wasn't intentional. So be super intentional with what you're going to do and stay with it. I highly recommend people either join a men's group or hire a coach like I did, because I think having accountability and having that feedback loop is what changes everything. And I've seen it happen with guys who were just like me. They were stuck. But when they had that feedback loop from a coach or just other guys, men being around other men, I found it to be very, very valuable. And that was one of my apprehensions joining a men's group too. When my wife was telling me to do it, I was like, I don't need no men's group. This is what I said. I said, I don't need no men's group. Why do I need a men's group? Like, talk about my feelings with a bunch of dudes. That's soft. These guys are soft and I'm not soft. One last thing I got to tell you. When I was meeting with my coach, when I first started this process, he goes, I'm going to need you to read every day. I go, yeah, I already do that. He goes, okay. I need you to wake up early. I go, I get up at 4 a.m. He goes, okay, you got me beat. He goes, I need you to do that. I go, dude, I do all the stuff, the cold plunges and everything. I'm super intentional. Okay. Like I love high performance. I was doing everything high performers do. But like you said, Garrett, earlier, I wasn't bringing in that same high performance intentionality into my marriage. It was just to my health and my business. I wasn't doing it in the marriage. And one of the big things I'll say when we talk about the human needs is my focus, my human need is to be significant. I want to know that I lived, I loved, and I mattered. I want people to remember me, that he did some great things. That's one of my human needs. And I talk about this in the book. You have to kind of figure out your human needs. When I started shifting my human needs from not being all about significance and me and how much I matter and he's so great, and I started switching it to love and connection, and I started prioritizing the needs differently, I started shifting it to love and connection towards my family, everything changed. My intentionality changed, everything changed. So that's what I would tell people. Really evaluate your human needs. See what you value most right now. Most of us have two human needs that are like the highest tip of the spear that we really value. And those are usually what drives us for most of the time. For me, it was significance and growth. I told you from the beginning, I love to grow. I love to learn. Now you can see there's a disconnect. He loves to learn. He loves to grow. He loves to know that he changed someone's life and he matters. Where's love and connection? I didn't even value that. It was like at the bottom. It was like, yeah, when I get to it, when I get some spare time. And so there was a big disconnect. When I started to shift love and connection to the top, everything changed.
That's awesome. I love that. There's so many things that come to mind there, and one of them is when you talk about you're already getting up at 4 a.m., already doing cold plunges, already working out. I think that speaks to the power of habit. You're doing things that to some people might sound very daunting and challenging, but because they've become habits for you, you don't need as much activation energy. It doesn't take as much willpower. It's not as, you don't have to really overcome as much to do it. And so it comes easier for you, but there always is. But so then you have to apply that energy to build habits at home. It'll kind of lean into that growth edge there. And that can be harder. Something that might sound easy to someone else or come more easily to them, is more difficult to you or to me because you haven't built the habits yet. Whereas, I get up and work out every day, just it's part of my routine. I don't even think
Yeah.
about it. I'm never like, oh, I don't want to do this. I mean, there's no resistance to that just because it's a habit. So I think that's one interesting thing. There's a lot, so much good stuff in there. So you may have already said it. I'm going to ask you my closing question here. If you could, I mean, so many powerful ideas that we covered here today, but if you could have one message that you could put on a billboard for everyone to see, or one message you could scream from a mountaintop that everyone would hear, what would that message be?
Oh, that's good. I think it was, and again, I didn't make these up, so I can't take credit for any of these things that we talked about, some of these high level quotes or concepts, but I think it really just comes down to leadership, brother. So, it's there's no bad teams. There's just bad leaders. If I had to keep screaming that out, I think I would, or maybe I would put on the billboard, "You're the problem," and go start with that, and move on forward. I think if you do, you bring that into the equation, man. I don't care what you do. You can apply that to anywhere in your life.
Yeah, I love that. It's extreme ownership, leadership, really good framework there. So this was excellent. One of the things that you talked about, of course, was the value of coaching. If people are interested in coaching, I mean, you do offer some services. Can you just tell people, in case anyone is interested in reaching out, following up, learning more about your work and your offerings, what are the best, your website and probably Instagram. I know we communicate on Instagram. I know from time to time.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are the best places for people to find you and your work?
Yeah. What I would say is, Joel Evan coaching on Instagram. I'm not as active there as I used to be in the past. I'm still there. I read all my DMs and stuff, so you could always reach out to me there. Info at Joel Evan Coaching. You can email me. The website limitlessfathers.com is up. I'm editing and adding some things there, so you could check out for things there. But yeah, if you're interested in any kind of coaching or one-on-one or anything like that, I would say just reach out either on Instagram or shoot me an email, info at Joel Evan Coaching, and we can set up something that way.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel. Thank you for your work, putting out this content, writing, all of your books, but of course, Limitless, which we mostly talked about today, and for leading by example. You've been through it, and you are now able to, far enough down the path where you can look back and tell others, hey, it's this way. This is how you get through these challenges, how you get over those obstacles. And I appreciate the work you're doing. I appreciate our friendship over the years, and thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, likewise, brother. Thanks for having me.
All right. And thank you for listening to this episode of the Undercurrent Podcast. We'll see you next time.